Robin Burley runs 5 Hertford Street. He's an old Etonian. When he was a child, he was visiting the private zoo of a family friend, and he was sadly mauled by a tiger, and that's been a big part of his life. And it's
as it would be if I was fucking mauled by a tiger at my family friend's zoo. That would be a big part of my fucking life.
I wouldn't forget it. Yeah. Let's put it that way.
G'day. Welcome back to the Breaker Pod. I'm Lachlan Cartwright.
I'm Ravi Samaya.
We are Breaker, coming to you this week from Brunetti in downtown New York in the West Village. Thank you to James.
Thank you, James.
Owner.
Thank you, James, for providing one of our newsrooms.
One of the many newsrooms, Ravi, that we have throughout the city. We've had the Finale newsroom. We had the Cowgirl newsroom.
I've heard
last week we're on the local newsroom.
I've heard there are some publications just have one nusroom in an office. It seems
what madness.
Seems bizarre.
Why wouldn't you just have multiple downtown newsrooms?
Do they have pizza?
I can smell that oven. It smells bloody good. Absolutely delicious. So welcome back to the Breaker Pod. We're the only pod where you can watch the founders of a startup age in real time. Ravi, I feel like I have aged about a year in the last month. We're up to our 4th week of Breaker. We are now at 2 editions a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm really excited because we have started to report on the mayor's race. We had our first piece about the mayor's race and Andrew Cuomo's relationship, or lack of, with the New York Post.
Yeah, I mean, New York politics is its own strange world. Someone described it in one of the stories we wrote about it as a sewing circle. And there's something to that, but it's like the world's most cynical, brutal sewing circle is how I would describe it.
It is going to be brutal.
I can't imagine a mayoral race that would be between 2 candidates, primarily between 2 candidates with the baggage of Adams and Cuomo happening in any other city.
So just to lay it out for our audience who are not in New York, Eric Adams, who is the incumbent, who has been the mayor of the city over the last 4 years, he came to the role, Ravi, with a lot of hype, a lot of promise. If you remember, Bill de Blasio was in that role previously, and a lot of people were down on de Blasio. It was the joke was he was always at the YMCA in Park Slope and not running the city. As I'm saying that, I'm now just singing YMCA and all the...
You're in the right neighborhood. You're in the YMCA neighborhood.
Trump audience. In any event, Adams comes to power. He's this vegan from Brooklyn, maybe. No one knows where he lives. He doesn't drink. Spends a lot of time at private members clubs like Zero Bond. And he comes to, the office with much fanfare and much promise. He's a former cop. He gets in partly because of his, law and order stance. And the New York Post swings all its support towards Adams. They endorse Adams. A couple of sources I spoke to said it really was that endorsement that clinched victory for Adams, the power of the New York Post. But fast forward 4 years, Eric Adams is in a couple of spots of bother.
That is a wonderful piece of understatement. He's been accused in a criminal indictment of various forms of corruption that managed to be both eyebrow-raising and extremely petty.
The Turkish...
Yeah, you can Google it if you want to figure it out. He denies all of it, of course. And then that's only one layer of his spots of bother.
Sure.
The second layer is the Trump administration has asked for those charges to be dropped, and there are accusations floating around that Mr. Adams, Mayor Adams, made a deal. Yeah,
allegedly.
Made a deal. Allegedly. He denies all of this, but
denies it all.
In another city, I would imagine someone would say, I'm carrying too much baggage. I can't possibly run. Not in New York.
No.
And then
full steam ahead.
Full steam ahead.
Running for one of the most pivotal gigs in New York politics.
And his main opponent, there are 7 or 8 people in the race, many of whom are wonderful and worth your time checking out, but we're not going to mention here.
We'll mention them in future weeks, potentially.
Exactly. His main opponent is Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York. He's had a couple of spots about himself.
Any baggage there, Rav? Any issues he might want to clean up in aisle 6 before he really gets going. So he announces it really was the worst kept secret in New York. We'd been hearing for some time he was going to enter the race, as had basically every journo in the city with a pulse. But he announces, and the New York Post are ready to go with a wood. Now, if you don't know what a wood is, that is the splash, the front page of the New York Post. And their wood, the day after Cuomo announced, was "Say It Ain't Quo." Just a brilliant bit of headline writing. And they brought up the nursing home scandal, which happened during COVID, and Cuomo's Me Too episodes. But the New York Post history with Andrew Cuomo goes way back. And they have had a ding-dong, to put it lightly, with him for quite some time. Everything from bail reform to economic issues to a whole bunch of matters. And the New York Post really kind of picked up where they left off with Cuomo and just gave him a good little touch-up, a good little bashing. They even resurfaced photos last week we had in the piece of Cuomo with Yasser Arafat, who's deceased, the former PLO leader. And it's clear that they are going to be going after Cuomo. Now, this presents a bit of a headache for Cuomo because the New York Post really kind of clinched the result for Adams. And Ravi, I think that Cuomo's camp understands the power and the importance of the New York Post in the city. The New York Daily News barely exists, sadly, limps along. The New York Times doesn't do Mayoral endorsements any longer. So the New York Post, besides Breaker, the New York Post really is going to play a huge role in deciding, I think, who the next mayor of New York is.
Yeah, it's kind of come back in a really strange way. I feel like the Post has a cultural impact that no other publication has. Just because it's wood or it's front page, it's such a moment. You walk around, you'll see it in cafes and bars and bodegas, and it's like kind of your way of checking in on a certain strain of New Yorker. And it's also one of the things we mentioned in the piece is the city's gone a bit more right wing than usual. It's the cliche in New York is that whoever wins the Democratic primary is going to win the election because it's such a blue city. But actually, the thing is shifting to some extent, and therefore the Post's cultural power is growing. It puts it in a rough spot because, Cuomo is the overwhelming frontrunner, I think we can say, even at this early stage. But they hate him. They really seem to viscerally hate the man.
And look, I worked at the Post, full disclosure, back in the day when Cole Ellen, the Aussie editor.
It's a deep cut there for Cambodian historians.
was running it. Keith Poole, Brit, took it over 4 years ago and has actually done an absolute bang-up job in, bringing it up a couple of notches. And the Post now is really a national tabloid, and it has that impact because of the wood, and the paper has gone from strength to strength. They even claim that they're now profitable, which is astounding because they used to lose Uncle Rupes, who we'll get to later in the pod, a shit ton of money, and they don't any longer. But they absolutely hate Cuomo. But they also, I think, in the back of their heads know that Adams he's got no chance here, and he may even drop out. He may even not make it to the primary, and then obviously on to November. And I spoke to Stu Loza, Ravi, who was Mayor Bloomberg's press secretary back in the day, and he told me
very mean to me at press conferences.
Was he?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I just didn't like the cut of my jib.
Come on!
I used to have this press conference trick. I always had a trick where I wore a neon pink hat. Because when there's a press conference, neon pink hat.
Can you wear the hat to the Breaker pod?
I don't know if I still have it, but my trick was.
If you have a neon pink hat, Breaker at breakermedia.com.
Yeah, send it my way because at a press conference, they're like looking around. Who are we going to call on? Who are we going to call on? If you're wearing a neon pink hat, you're getting the first question. Because you're the only person wearing a neon pink hat.
You're wearing a fucking neon pink hat.
Yeah, that's it. And it's easy to reference. The guy in the hat, Yeah. That's me. Sorry. Side note. He spoke to Stu.
And he was lovely to me. So
he's a lovely fella. He and I,
And he made a good point that he would advise Bloomberg that it's New York City. You can do the most innovative, incredible, work here that will be married in cities throughout the world. Or you could be at war with the New York Post, but not both. And again, I think that is what Cuomo's camp is really wrestling with right now.
Yeah, it's sort of a weird romance because they need each other. The Post does not like to back losers. It likes to back winners.
And Rupert Murdoch, Uncle Rupes, always loves to back a winner. Look at how they flip-flop on Trump, the New York Post did. They were really going for DeSantis when Trump announced. They, quite hilariously and brilliantly, wooded off a totally different story. And then just the strapline was Florida man
makes announcement,
and they buried it on page 26. And then they went on for DeSantis and Nikki Haley, but then had to swing back around to Trump when it was clear he was the nominee.
Yeah, that's it. They want to back a winner, and Cuomo ultimately does not want to be in a war with New York's main tabloid, because I'm sure he has things he wants to do, or he says there are plenty of things he wants to do. And it's kind of going to be interesting in a sort of romantic comedy way to see how they sort of, like porcupines back towards each other and
trying to mate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like that. There's kind of an awkward courtship going on.
Well, and the other part of this yarn, we did it over 2 editions, was what we've both been hearing about the tactics that Eric Adams may use against Cuomo.
Yeah, the background to this is that the Adams campaign, and this is just the feeling that I get, but it's also been reported a bunch. The feeling I get from making calls into that campaign, and just the feeling around the city is there's not much of an Adams campaign. Like when we reached out to people on the Adams side, it was genuine.
So you felt like it was kind of a ghost town.
Yeah, I said it was kind of like a ghost town. It was genuinely hard to get anyone to respond to anything. I ended up having to call allies of Adams, who weren't formally involved with the campaign, to speak on his behalf. And, what I had heard is that before Cuomo entered the race, we're talking about early January, he and his team were really preoccupied with being accused of racism by Adams. Adams ran this kind of a pressure group within the NYPD called 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And it was to try and repair the very real schisms between law enforcement and the black community. And it's
a worthy campaign.
Yeah, and it sort of was his path to a political career once he stepped down. It was kind of what pushed him in that direction. And one of his allies, one of his co-founders of that group, which is shortened to 100 Blacks, this guy Mark Claxton said, look, he talks about race. That's his thing. It's going to come up. And we'd heard from several people that if he continues in the campaign, race is going to be an issue. Now, Cuomo, when he ran for governor in 2002, was accused in all sorts of implied and nefarious ways of racism, because the candidate, McCall, he was running against, was black and would have been the first black governor of the state. And he's very sensitive to those things. We heard, and Cuomo's campaign denied this, but they deny everything, that he would even...
A lot of denials.
A lot of very sarcastic...
They admit nothing, and they deny everything.
The amount of times that Cuomo's spokesman has said to me, that's not true. When I kind of know it's true.
The Modi item, you called him about, right?
Yeah,
and he's mates with Modi. And we'd seen the receipts. And then he said, he used the Royals line, or he used the classic, Prince Harry line. Recollections vary.
Yeah. What happened was, actually, is that I said to him, so this is an item we ran in one of our first issues, which was about an unlikely friendship between Andrew Cuomo and Narendra Modi. And now we happen to have seen exchanges... Communications, but I didn't mention that to Cuomo's spokesperson when I called up. I just said...
Did you need to?
Well, no, I didn't. I just said, look, we've heard this. Absolutely not true. Okay, well, we've seen communications. We do not recall.
Yeah, that's what recollections vary. They do not recall.
Yeah, but maybe they're right. But
their tactic here is going to be to twist it back on Adams. We will be waiting, watching, and reporting, and we'll bring you more on the mayor's race. Another big topic here at Breaker that we have been pursuing is the private members clubs that have just, opened left, right, and center in the city. We were the first to break that Zero Bond is in talks, still in negotiations with Tillman Fertitta, the owner of Bubba the Gump Shrimp Company.
The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company.
The Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, which cracks me up every single time we get to say it.
And the potential new ambassador to Italy.
Correct. And he also owns Keen Steakhouse, a steak in the corner store. Scott Santiano is still trying to get that deal closed. Hopefully, one day it will. But we had an item about a very famous London club that is coming to New York.
Yeah, it's not exactly coming to New York, but there's London's perhaps most renowned club, or most...
Maxine's.
It's called 5 Hertford Street. And it's where I believe Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's first date was there. And it's, a hangout for royals and A-listers. It's exclusive.
Do you think they'd let us in there?
Absolutely not. and actually, nor would I want to go, honestly.
I always want to go to these places once and just check it out.
But you know
Just
what happens when
once.
you go there is that everyone's looking over your shoulder the whole time.
That's true. I remember going to Bougie. Bougie was the joint that Harry would go back in the day. It was like in Kensington in London. And I remember going to that and checking it out. And it was like a one and done for me, Ravi, because I looked around. It was all bottle service. There was all the Sloaney Pony set. I
got kicked out of the band.
Shit-faced. You did?
Yeah, because I went to Bougie's with a friend and it was empty and boring. So we started dancing very stupidly. And a guy came up, a manager came up and said, excuse me.
You were having too much fun.
No, he said, excuse me, this is Bougie. You've got to dance seriously.
Oh.
And
How do you dance seriously?
Well, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So then we started ballroom dancing, and he did not appreciate
the piss take.
He did not appreciate us taking the note in the way that we had taken the note,
and interpreting the note as only you could.
Yeah, I was a little bastard. Sorry.
So this new endeavor, the membership price is kind of eye-watering.
So anyway, this guy Robin Burley runs 5 Hertford Street. He's an old Etonian. He's, exists in that world between London society and London politics. His half siblings are the Goldsmiths, Zach and Jemima.
He ran for mayor of London, I think, at one point.
Yes, it's sort of this blend of conservative politics and high society. And, when he has this very exotic life. When he was a child, he was visiting the private zoo of a family friend, as we all do.
As we all do.
As we all have.
Who has not?
Who has not done that? And he was sadly mauled by a tiger at that zoo, and that's been a big part of his life. And it's
as it would be if I was fucking mauled by a tiger at my family friend zoo. That would be a big part of my fucking life.
I wouldn't forget it.
Yeah,
Let's put it that way.
Just another day in the life of visiting the tiger at the fucking zoo.
What I found digging into this, it's a novel. It's constantly a novel. It reminded me of Edward St. Aubyn, the whole thing. It's got that same sort of vibe of kind of casual, annoyed comfort and perfection as a flex in some strange way. Anyway, he's opening a club called Maxime's, I believe between 69th and 70th on Madison Avenue.
Another one will definitely be invited to the opening of.
Definitely. I'm waiting for an email, Robin. He didn't get back to me when I sent him a note. No one got back to me.
That's sad.
I was expecting an invite. I was expecting to say, look, thank you for your interest. Come by for a drink.
Well, $200K they are charging.
Yeah, so what I found is that their foundation membership, they're building it now. And often when people are building something, they need cash. And so they sell these. I'm not suggesting I know that's what's happening, but that's my presumption. And their founder memberships are $200,000.
Wow.
And that's
Do we have $200K to start a media company? Do we have $200K to go to this club and get a foundation membership?
Not on me, but I would recommend Brunetti for their excellent pizza, priced significantly below $200,000.
I endorse that recommendation. It was also a big...
It's a thing, sorry to interrupt, it's a thing about being a New Yorker. I feel like if you're a New Yorker, you don't line up for restaurants.
Well, we've talked
you
about
just go to the next restaurant because the next restaurant's going to be equally great.
In this marvelous city, there are so many cracking dive bars. There are so many brilliant cocktail bars,
and not just that, but on the same street as the spot you're trying to get into.
You don't need to pay $200K
as the
to
spot.
go to a club.
I mean, it might be marvelous if you want to pay $200K. Pay $200K.
I'm sorry, you don't.
But what I used to when I first used to visit New York, there'd be like some venue I'd have in mind, and you would go to that venue, and you would line up outside, and you would get in there, and you would think, now I must be having the fun that I thought I would have, and you never are. And eventually,
very rarely,
eventually you live here and you're like, you know what, even on the same street is going to be a venue that's going to be more fun. I am not lining up for this nonsense. So take a tip from New Yorkers, just go to wherever feels fun.
Rupert Murdoch, Uncle Rupes, it was his birthday.
A man who knows fun, I think.
Yeah, of course he does. He's on his 4th wife, I think. That's
a debatable point when it comes to
fun. We wanted to send him a birthday present. We the first
it was 94
week,
yesterday.
The first week, we kind of had talked about this. We are trying to get a lot done here at Breaker, 2 newsletters a week and a pod, and a bunch of other stuff in the works. So we kind of ran down the clock, but we got him an item for his birthday about a bunch of Murdoch projects in the works, books and docs from the likes of Claire Atkinson, Gabe Sherman. I'm also hearing Sir William Shawcross, who had done a book about Rupert in the past. Liz Garbus, the documentarian, is also got a project in the works. Penna Letter has got one
of the New Yorker
in the works. Why do you think, Ravi, there is such a plethora of productions and books and Murdoch works in the works?
I feel like he's a kind of old school mogul in a way that you don't get so much anymore.
He's the last of these.
Yeah, because Musk is a different animal, and Jeff Bezos is a different animal, and these tech moguls are a different animal. Murdoch is this old school character. I also feel like we're in a moment, I don't know if you agree with this, I feel like in a moment we all want to see family drama. I'm certainly in a moment where family drama is really interesting to me, and it's something I think you'll see appear in Breaker more often. And I think you couldn't ask for more family drama than the drama currently occurring in the Murdoch family. And, on a personal level, I feel for them. On a writerly level, which is a much less nice level than my personal
Everything
level.
is copy.
Yeah, it's like Shakespeare, or actually I always think it's more like Chaucer. It's got kind of this like broad, grotesque is the wrong word, but like, yeah, it's got a very big kind of mogul kind of drama feeling.
We also this week had an item about a husband and wife law firm called Clare Locke, Tom Clare and Libby Locke. It's a story I've been following for some years. I wrote about this.
You broke the story, I believe.
Yeah, I was the first to profile them back in 2018 when I was at the Daily Beast. And I wrote a piece back then. I actually have a whole folder of Clare Locke.
I really want to see this folder.
Letters.
Are we talking this thick or are we talking this thick?
It's fairly comprehensive.
We got to see this.
So Clare Locke are a law firm that have cemented a reputation for being the go-to.
Yeah, they're the go-to law firm. If you're a chagrined billionaire and you feel like someone shouldn't have written about you, whatever
Bill
they wrote
Ackman.
about you, Bill Ackman, Ray Dalio, you go to Clare Locke.
Fager,
And Clare
Matt
Locke writes you a
Lowry.
long, sprawling,
Verbose.
very verbose, surprisingly,
Menacing.
Surprisingly poorly spell-checked letter.
Scary, borderline.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. Yeah. They'll really go after your personality.
They have cemented this rep because back in the day it was Marty Singer who was the Hollywood pitbull
Charles
lawyer
Harder.
who would send these scary letters out.
Yeah, I feel like in American life there's always one go-to lawyer if you want to scare people.
And
For a while that was
they
Charles
have-
Harder, then Marty Singer.
and
Singer,
they have
Charles
taken
Harder.
over that
Yeah.
turf, and they kind of they kind of sort of after the. Sorry, I'm going to be so careful when I talk about these two. So, all right.
Do you want me to do it? Because I've got New York Times E's on
Yes.
my side. Let's just explain. It is extremely scary to talk about law firms because they don't even have to call anyone to see you. They are already a law firm.
And also, this is a pod where we freestyle a bit and get a bit loose. And I just don't want Breaker being sued in its first month by Tom and Libby, g'day Tom and Libby, or any lawyer. So I am very carefully.
We would like to make it clear we have no malice or forethought,
explaining-
just to pick a random phrase out of the air, and that our only concern is with disseminating information in the public interest.
and being accurate and being fair. So I profiled this.
Yeah, it's an important story.
Yeah, I profiled Clare Locke back in 2018, and during that reporting, a number of partners.
What drew you to it?
It's one of those ones where I'd sat down with the source for for just a sort of drinks, and the person said, "Have you heard of this law firm, Clare Locke?" And I was like, "Haven't heard of them. Don't know what you're talking about." And then several days later, I'm with someone else from a different kind of world, and the person said, "I just got a letter from these Clare Locke people." I was like, "Weird. I just had heard this name, just recently." And then it happened a third time where someone's like, "Hey, can I get your advice on Clare Locke?" And I was like, "All right, now I'm just going to put down everything and figure out who is Clare Locke," because I was like, there's got to be a yarn here. And that's always a good sign, as as a journo, when you're hearing, something from multiple sources or multiple people in different directions, and it's not being pushed on you. And so I just dropped everything and started reporting out, looked through Pacer, which is a database of lawsuits, and just hit the phones and started reporting out, who Clare Locke were. And, I'd established that they were this husband and wife law firm, and that they were involved in, pretty big litigation against media companies. So they did the Rolling Stone rape on campus. They sued over that. They were repping Sarah Palin in a matter against the Times. There was a matter with CNN. But then I started to discover they were also repping a number of prominent journos in Me Too stories, journos who had been accused of sexual harassment or Me Too type allegations. Matt Lauer, Jeff Fager, who used to run 60 Minutes, Glenn Thrush from the New York Times. And so the interesting twist of the tale was, well, here is this law firm who are trying to shut down stories and sue media companies, but then journos are using them to, prevent or stop, Me Too stories.
It's a great story, and it illustrates exactly why Lachlan is an old school journalist. He never stops moving. He's constantly talking to people, and he's therefore constantly surprising everyone with his stuff. So,
and also, that looks like he's aged about a year in the last month. But in the course of that reporting, a couple of partners at Kirkland Ellis had mentioned to me about this rumor that Tom and Libby were in some kind of romantic relationship at Kirkland. Now, they deny that. They strenuously deny that. David Emmerich, who is a New York Times reporter, is out with a new book called Murder the Truth. It's out this week. He was kind enough to give us an advanced look. And in that book, he had some reporting that kind of matched what
So what David did,
which is
always such a good idea if you're writing a complicated story, is just laid out the timeline. So he pointed out that at Kirkland Ellis, these two work very closely together, that there were rumors which they deny.
They deny.
They then left to start their own firm. I believe Miss Locke's partner had sent in an email accusing them of having
just as Clare Locke gets off the ground in 2014, all the employees there get this random email from Locke's husband who says, words to the effect that this isn't just a professional relationship, and he's inferring that there is something more afoot.
Yeah, precisely. And then they deny that.
Subsequently,
they get married. That's a coincidence.
Correct. And
that's my final statement.
We are not going to get sued by anyone. But it's a great book, by the way. It is. I've only had a chance to look at a few chapters, but there is great reporting in the book about the Gawker trial, about how Hulk Hogan set about with the use of Peter Thiel to take down Gawker. And there's an Aussie who has been named before, who was this Aussie bloke who came up with the strategy and mentioned it to Thiel, who was all in because he'd been wanting to get back at Gawker for some time. And the Aussie bloke spoke to David Emmerich for that book. So Murder the Truth is out now. We also this week took a little look at the goings on at the Daily Beast, where a number of people are leaving. What was interesting there in that reporting, we also picked up on that they've been testing AI. They've been testing the use of artificial intelligence in a number of articles. But then they told me that they were testing the efficiency and it's not that efficient. So maybe there's some good news for journos yet, that we're not going to be replaced. Everyone's freaking out about AI. AI is going to steal your jobs and all of that crazy talk. Well, it turns out, they fed the AI, I think it was a New York Post article, and they fed it a HuffPo article. I don't even know how that works, because HuffPo did the original reporting and the Post did, then they feed it to the AI, and the AI spits out an article that the Daily Beast then ran. They did declare it was AI. They've updated their ethics and their standards to reflect that they're using AI. But what was interesting is when I went to them for comment, they said, we're testing the efficiency. It's not that efficient.
Yeah, I like that they said it was a specially trained AI, as if you find just sort of random, naturally trained AIs around.
Yeah, what does that even mean? Exactly. Specially trained AI. They sat down with their...
Yeah, it's a bit like...
some special...
It's a bit like sauce. When you see on some kind of packet of food, it says contains artificial and natural flavors. That's just flavors. Yeah. There's no other kind of flavors.
What are they talking about?
We didn't need those words.
What is going on there?
This is what happens if you write for a living. You become a horrible, horrible pedant when you walk around.
I feel that this is one of the big fears that's going on in newsrooms right now. It's like, what impact will AI have on how journalists do their job and on how newsrooms hire and newsrooms work? So I think it was quite enlightening and sort of heartening that they were like, tested it. We're hoping to be more efficient. Turns out it wasn't that efficient.
I mean, the whole thing for me is like, early man staring up at a monolith. It's just absurd. It's computing. It's a slightly different form of computing.
Are we going to start using AI at Breaker?
I don't even know how.
Yeah. Can we make sure it is like a specially trained special AI?
Exactly.
I don't want the normal AI.
We need to train an AI to walk around Manhattan meeting people, which is mostly what what we do.
And booking pod venues if you would like us to feature your restaurant, your coffee shop, your bar, your laundromat at the Breaker for the Breaker Pod. Please email
We're especially into the laundromats, actually.
Breaker at breakermedia.com. And you can also go to breakermedia.com and sign up for our newsletter now,
which we recommend
twice a week, Tuesdays
for
and
totally
Thursdays.
altruistic reasons.
And Ravi, this pod, which is up everywhere that you get your pods from, and it's up on YouTube. And what should people do?
They should subscribe. They should like. They should listen.
They should
tell
share.
a friend. They should
tell two
switch off
friends.
their TV. They should set their phone aside. They should take a moment. Should just be with Breaker.
And you know how people 2x their pods? What should they do with the Breaker Pod?
I don't even know
feel
what
like they
2x
should watch
means.
it really. People 2x
they
their pods,
2x
so it's it's a thing.
No, but it's not just 2xing because they 2x it and then they do something else while they're watching it.
Yes.
To me, that's just panic.
But for the Breaker Pod, I think they should go a bit slower.
0.5x.
Yeah, they should go a bit slower with us.
0.25x.
Because you have to just slow down when you're listening to us, try and work out the bloody hell we're talking about most of the time. But I think also just to get the experience of the Breaker Pod, please 0.5x. We'll be back next week at Breaker. Cheers.
Bye.
Confuses in my